The grand hall of the Celestial Empire was brighter than 1,000 suns. Tall silver pillars rose to a ceiling filled with moving stars, and banners of conquered worlds hung high above the crowd. Alien nobles from many species stood in long rows, their armor shining, their eyes cold and proud. At the center of the hall stood the arrogant queen of Zithera, her crown made of living crystal, her long white robe flowing behind her like mist. She believed her empire ruled the galaxy, and today she wanted to prove it once more. At the far end of the hall, the massive doors slowly opened. The sound echoed like thunder. Every head turned at the same time. 2 royal guards stepped aside, and one single human walked in alone. He did not wear shining royal clothes. He wore a dark military coat with old medals on his chest. His boots were worn from long journeys. His face was calm, his eyes steady and unreadable. He did not look impressed by the golden walls or the powerful crowd watching him. He simply walked forward step by step. The aliens whispered among themselves. Humans were new to the galactic stage. Small, soft, emotional, easy to break. At least that was what most of them believed. Some laughed quietly. Some looked at him with open disrespect. A few old generals studied him carefully, because they noticed something strange. The human did not look nervous. He did not look afraid. He looked like a man who had already seen worse places than this hall. He stopped 10 steps away from the throne and bowed slightly. Not too low, not too proud, just enough to show respect without lowering himself. The queen watched him with sharp eyes. She expected fear, she expected weakness, but she saw none. That annoyed her more than open defiance. So, the queen said, her voice echoing through hidden speakers, smooth but cold, "You are the representative of Earth." "Yes, Your Majesty." The human answered calmly, his voice steady and simple. A small smile touched the queen's lips, but it was not kind. "We have heard many stories about humans," she said. "Emotional creatures, short lives, always fighting among themselves." The hall filled with light laughter. "Tell me, human, how many wars have you fought?" The question sounded like a joke to most of the crowd. Many expected him to say 1 or 2, maybe 3. The human did not answer right away. He looked at the queen, then slowly at the crowd around him, as if measuring every face in the room. Then he spoke in a quiet voice that somehow carried across the entire hall. 99. For 1 second there was silence. Then loud laughter exploded across the chamber. Some aliens bent forward holding their stomachs. Others shook their heads. Even young officers laughed openly. 99, someone repeated in mock surprise. "Does he count playground fights?" Another joked. But not everyone laughed. At the left side of the throne stood an old war general from the draft species, his skin covered in battle scars. His mechanical eye focused on the human without blinking. He had studied human records in secret. He knew something the others did not. He did not laugh. The queen raised her hand, and the hall became quiet again. Her eyes narrowed slightly. 99 wars, she repeated slowly. "And you survived all of them?" "Yes," the human replied. His answer was simple. No pride, no drama, just a fact. And that calm answer made the air feel heavier. The queen leaned forward on her throne. "Then tell me, human," she said softly, "if you have fought 99 wars, why are you still alive?" A few in the crowd smiled again, waiting for him to break, waiting for fear to finally show on his face. But the human only took a slow breath. His eyes did not move. "Because," he said, "I did not fight to survive." The hall grew quiet again. Even the whispers stopped. Something in his tone changed the mood. It was not anger, it was not pride. It was something deeper, something heavy. "I fought," he continued, "so others could survive." The old draft general's mechanical eye dimmed slightly, as if processing hidden data. The queen's fingers tightened on her throne. She did not like how the room felt now. She had planned to humiliate him, to show the galaxy that humans were small and weak, but instead, a strange tension filled the air. The human slowly removed one glove and placed it on the floor beside him. His hand showed scars, deep burns, old cuts, marks of battles long past. He did not show them for sympathy. He showed them as proof. "In your records," he said calmly, "you will find 99 conflicts where humanity stood alone." Murmurs spread across the hall again. Not laughter this time, but doubt, curiosity, and the first small hint of unease. The queen straightened her back, her voice sharper now. "Are you threatening this empire?" The human shook his head slowly. "No, your majesty." "Then why are you here?" she demanded. He looked directly at her, and for the first time, something powerful moved behind his calm eyes. "Because," he said quietly, "war number 100 is coming." The words did not echo loudly, but they hit harder than any shout. Silence fell across the grand hall of the Celestial Empire. No one laughed now. And somewhere deep inside the palace walls, ancient defense systems began to wake from sleep. The hall remained silent after his warning, but inside his mind the silence broke, because the queen's question had opened an old door he had kept closed for many years, and behind that door lived the memory of his first war, the war that turned a young soldier into something colder and stronger, the war that taught him what survival really meant. He had been only 19 when the first ships appeared above Earth's outer colonies. The sky over the farming world of Haven. 3 had once been blue and peaceful. Simple people lived there, families who wanted nothing more than quiet lives and open fields. Then one night the stars shifted, dark shapes blocked the light, and unknown vessels entered orbit without warning. There were no messages, no diplomacy, only silence before destruction. The alien species later known as the Karth Dominion did not send armies at first. They sent fire. Beams of white energy fell from the sky like silent lightning. Cities disappeared in seconds. Communication towers melted. Defense satellites were destroyed before they could even send full reports. The people on the ground did not understand what was happening, and fear spread faster than the flames. Back then, he was just a cadet stationed on a small patrol cruiser near Haven 3. His training was incomplete, his uniform still new, his mind filled with ideas of honor and glory. When the emergency signal came, his captain did not hesitate. The cruiser jumped toward the colony, even though they knew they were outmatched, even though scans showed enemy ships 10 times their size. The first battle lasted only 14 minutes, 14 long minutes that felt like hours. The human cruiser fired everything it had, missiles, rail cannons, plasma bursts. But the enemy shields barely flickered. Return fire tore through space like silent knives. One hit broke their engines. Another cut the ship in half. Metal screamed. Gravity failed, and the world turned into spinning chaos. He remembered floating in smoke and sparks. Alarms screaming in his ears. Bodies drifting past him in zero gravity. Some of them his friends, some of them still reaching for help that would never come. He had frozen for a second. Just 1 second. And in war that is enough to die. But something inside him moved, not bravery, not anger, just instinct. He pushed himself toward an escape pod, while the ship continued to break apart around him. When his pod launched, he watched his cruiser explode behind him, a bright flash in the darkness, his first command, his first crew, gone in less than a quarter of an hour. He thought that was the worst moment of his life. He was wrong. The pod crashed in a Haven 3 surface hours later, landing in what used to be farmland. The fields were burning, the air thick with ash. In the distance, he saw the remains of a city still smoking under a red sky. He was alone, injured, and armed with nothing but a side rifle and basic armor. He could have hidden. He could have waited for rescue that might never come. But then he heard something that changed everything. He heard children crying. The sound came from the ruins of a transport vehicle half buried in debris. He moved without thinking, ignoring the pain in his leg, ignoring the fear that enemy patrols could be nearby. When he reached the vehicle, he found 3 children trapped inside with their mother unconscious beside them. The youngest could not have been older than 5. Their eyes were wide with terror, looking at him as if he was the last piece of hope in a broken world. In that moment, he understood something simple and terrible. War was not about medals, not about glory, not about strategy rooms and proud speeches. It was about standing between destruction and the innocent, even if you were not ready, even if you were afraid. Enemy ground units arrived soon after, tall armored figures scanning the ruins for survivors. He dragged the family out of the vehicle and hid them in a collapsed drainage tunnel. Then he turned back toward the open street alone, his hands shaking, his heart racing so loud he thought the aliens could hear it. That was the moment he stopped being a cadet and became a soldier. He did not win that battle. No human did. Haven 3 fell within 2 days, but he kept those children alive until evacuation forces finally broke through the blockade. He fought in alleyways, in broken houses, in smoke and darkness. He learned how to move silently, how to strike fast, how to survive when everything around him was lost. He watched friends die. He saw fear in every reflection, and he felt something inside him harden like steel placed in fire. When rescue ships finally arrived, he stood among the survivors covered in ash and blood, his eyes older than his age. Earth had lost its first colony that week. Thousands were dead, and the galaxy had learned that humanity was not alone anymore. That was war number 1. And he survived it not because he was strong, not because he was special, but because he understood one simple truth. If he fell, there would be no one left standing between the fire and those who could not fight. Back in the royal hall, the queen saw his expression change slightly, just for a second, as if a shadow passed through his memory. She thought it was weakness. She did not know it was something far more dangerous. It was experience. The old Drath general continued to watch him carefully, because he recognized that look. It was the look of someone who had already faced the end of the world once, and did not fear facing it again. And as the silence stretched across the golden chamber, the human commander knew that war number 100 would not be like the first, because this time humanity would not stand alone in the dark. This time the galaxy itself might need someone who had survived 99 wars and remembered exactly how the first one began. The queen watched him carefully, but she still did not understand that behind his calm face lived memories that would crush most rulers. And among those memories there was one that never left him, one that returned in dreams and silence, one that truly broke something inside him. War number 37. By the time that war began, he was no longer a young survivor hiding in ruins. He was a fleet commander, respected, feared, and known for impossible defenses. Humanity had grown stronger, its ships faster, its weapons sharper, and its soldiers harder than steel. Many believe humans had finally learned how to win clean wars. They were wrong. War 37 did not start with fire from the sky. It started with a message. A colony world named Ilaris Prime stopped answering communications. It was a peaceful research planet near the Outer Rim, full of scientists, engineers, and families. There were no military bases there, no heavy weapons, only laboratories and cities built near wide oceans. When long-range scans finally reached the system, they showed something impossible. The planet was still there, but all orbital stations were gone, and strange energy signals covered the surface like a disease. He led the rescue fleet himself, 12 human warships entering the silent system. No enemy ships in orbit, no visible fleet, only quiet darkness around a living world. That silence was worse than open battle, because silence means something is waiting. When the fleet moved closer, the first transmission reached them, not from humans, but from the unknown enemy. The signal was distorted, cold, and almost mechanical. It carried only one sentence: "You are too late." Moments later, the ocean surface of Ilaris Prime began to move. Massive shapes rose from beneath the water. Living ships, biological structures the size of mountains, their skin dark and wet, their weapons grown from bone and energy. This was the first contact with a Varel swarm, a species that did not conquer worlds, they consumed them. The battle that followed was chaos. Human ships fired in coordinated patterns. Rail cannons tore into living armor. Plasma bursts burned deep scars into alien flesh. But the swarm did not retreat. It did not panic. It adapted. Destroyed vessels fell burning into the atmosphere, and each time a Varel ship was damaged, smaller creatures launched from it like spores, attacking anything that moved. He ordered half his fleet to hold orbit while he led ground forces down to the surface, because scans showed something worse than enemy forces. There were still human life signs in the cities, thousands of them, trapped. The moment his boots touched the ground, he understood the truth of the message. The cities were not destroyed. They were infected. Organic structures covered buildings. Streets were wrapped in living growth, and people were trapped inside, transparent cocoons attached to the alien mass. Alive, conscious, unable to move, being slowly drained of energy. His soldiers wanted to fire heavy weapons and burn everything, but he stopped them because every blast risked killing the civilians still alive. So they moved forward with smaller arms, fighting in close quarters against creatures that moved like shadows and screamed without sound. Every step was a nightmare. Every corner held something waiting. He reached the central research tower where the largest life signs were detected. Inside, he found hundreds of civilians suspended in the alien web. Among them children, scientists, and even elderly colonists who had never seen war before. The swarm was using them as living power sources, and the only way to stop the process was to destroy the core organism controlling the infection. The core was deep beneath the city, growing around the planetary energy grid, and to reach it they had to pass through layers of living tissue and defensive creatures. The deeper they went, the heavier the air became, filled with a low vibration that felt like a heartbeat of something massive and cruel. They fought for hours underground, losing soldiers one by one. Corridors collapsed. Alien forms attacked from walls and ceilings, and still he pushed forward because above them thousands waited in silent terror. When they finally reached the core chamber, he saw it, a towering mass of pulsing flesh connected to the city through organic veins, and within its center, faint human silhouettes trapped in living amber. The swarm had merged with them completely. Removing the core would kill the organism, but it would also kill every person connected to it. For the first time since War I, he froze, not from fear of death, but from the weight of command. If he destroyed the core, thousands would die instantly. If he did nothing, millions would be consumed slowly as the infection spread. His officers waited for his order, their faces tense, their armor damaged, their eyes searching him for hope. He knew there was no perfect choice, no heroic solution, only sacrifice. He gave the order. The explosives were placed around the core. His soldiers withdrew while he remained behind to trigger the detonation manually because remote signals were being blocked. He looked once more at the trapped civilians, at their faint shapes inside the alien glow, and for a brief moment he whispered an apology no one else heard. The explosion shook the entire planet. The alien growth across the cities burned and collapsed. The swarm ships in orbit shrieked and retreated into deep space. And Alaris Prime was saved, but the cost was carved into his memory forever. When evacuation teams counted the survivors, they found only a fraction of the original population alive. Thousands had died in a single controlled blast ordered by his voice. The galaxy called it a victory. Earth gave him medals. News channels named him the savior of Alaris. But he did not feel like a savior, because every time he closed his eyes, he saw the faint shapes inside that living core, and he heard the silent apology he had whispered before pressing the trigger. That was the war that broke him, not because he lost, but because he won. Back in the royal hall, no one could see those memories. They only saw a calm human standing before a throne, but the old draft general sensed it, the stillness of someone who had made impossible choices and continued forward anyway. The queen believed she was speaking to a simple soldier. She did not realize she was facing a man who had destroyed a world's heart to save its future, a man who carried 37 wars inside him like silent ghosts. And as the Golden Hall waited for his next words, the truth remained unspoken but heavy in the air. The most dangerous warriors are not those who love battle, but those who have learned to live with what battle takes from them. There was one war the human commander never spoke about. One war that did not appear in public records. One war that even many human citizens did not fully know. And yet it was the reason several empires in that Golden Hall were still alive. It was war number 58, the war no one talks about. It began with disappearing stars, not exploding, not collapsing, simply vanishing from long-range maps. Entire systems went dark beyond the galactic frontier. At first, the great empires ignored it. They said it was natural cosmic activity, unstable suns, unknown anomalies, but human deep-range probes brought back a different truth. They found empty systems where planets had once orbited. Only cold dust and broken gravity fields remained. Something was not destroying worlds. It was erasing them. The first official encounter happened near the edge of human-explored space. A patrol fleet reported strange signals. Then silence. When a second fleet arrived, they did not find wreckage. They did not find debris. They found nothing, as if space itself had been cleaned. Only one damaged escape beacon drifted near the edge of the system, and its final recorded message was fragmented, but clear enough: they do not attack. They consume reality. The enemy later received a name whispered in secure human channels: the Null. Not because they called themselves that, but because wherever they passed, nothing remained. No radiation, no broken ships, not even dust. Long-range sensors could not lock onto them properly. Shapes flickered in and out of existence, as if they were not fully part of normal space. Human High Command understood immediately that this threat was beyond normal war. And for the first time, humanity did not call for galactic aid. They did not send warnings to every empire because they knew what would happen: panic, chaos, political arguments, delays. So they chose silence. They chose to stand alone. He was placed in command of a classified fleet built from humanity's most advanced technology: experimental weapons, unstable drives, ships that bent known physics. The mission was simple and impossible at the same time: stop the Null before they reach populated galactic regions, no matter the cost. The first direct engagement happened in a dead system already stripped clean. Human ships entered cautiously, scanners barely detecting faint distortions ahead. Then space itself seemed to tear open. Dark fractures formed like cracks in glass, and from those cracks shapes emerged. Not solid, not energy, but something between. Their presence made instruments fail and soldiers feel sudden cold inside their bones. When a human fleet opened fire, beams passed through some of the entities while others reacted violently. It was like fighting shadows that sometimes became solid. Every second required adaptation. New firing patterns, new shield calibrations, and even then ships began to vanish without explosion, simply folding inward and disappearing into those fractures. He realized quickly that traditional tactics would not work. So he ordered something no other fleet commander had ever done. He commanded his ships to deliberately overload their experimental drives and create controlled spatial distortions, turning the battlefield itself into a weapon. Space twisted under human engineering, forming gravity traps and energy storms that forced the Null into partial stability. And in those moments of forced reality, human weapons struck with full force. The battle lasted 3 days without rest. Crews fought while systems overheated and hulls cracked. At one point, half his fleet was gone, not destroyed in fire, but erased beyond recovery. And still he continued, because behind them lay inhabited systems that did not even know death was approaching. On the 3rd day, they discovered the core of the invasion, a massive rift expanding slowly, feeding on nearby matter, pulling fragments of reality into itself. It was not a ship, not a creature in the normal sense. It was a wound in space controlled by unseen intelligence. And if it fully opened, dozens of systems would vanish. There was only one solution: a forbidden weapon still in prototype stage, a singularity implosion device designed to collapse space inward. It had never been tested at full power, and calculations showed only a 30% chance of success, with a 70% chance of tearing the surrounding region apart permanently, including his own fleet. He did not hesitate long, because hesitation would mean extinction for worlds that would never know why they died. He ordered all remaining ships to retreat beyond safe range while his flagship remained closest to the rift to guide the detonation manually. Just like on Alaris Prime, he stayed behind again. As the device armed, the Null reacted violently. Fractures spread across the system. His ship trembled as reality bent around it. Crew members reported parts of the hull fading in and out. Alarms screamed about structural instability. And yet he stood on the bridge watching the expanding rift, knowing that if this failed, history itself might forget humanity ever existed. He activated the implosion. For a moment, there was no light, no sound, only pressure. Then space collapsed inward like a dying star. The rift folded into itself. The dark fractures snapped shut, and a shock wave rippled across the system. When sensors came back online, the Null presence was gone, not erased completely from existence, but pushed back beyond the frontier, contained for now. Half his fleet never returned. Entire crews were listed as missing with no debris to bury. and the official human record described the event only as a deep frontier anomaly resolved. The other empires never learned how close they had come to disappearing without warning. Back in the Golden Hall, some of those very empires stood proudly under their banners, unaware that their worlds had once been a few silent days away from becoming nothing. The human commander did not speak of War 58. He did not demand gratitude. He did not reveal that humanity had faced the darkness alone so others could sleep peacefully under stable stars. But the old draft general suspected something of that scale had happened, because he had studied the sudden disappearance of deep frontier anomalies years ago, and he had noticed that after that event, human fleets quietly expanded their patrol zones further into empty space, as if guarding something unseen. The Queen still saw only a single human in a worn coat. She did not see the man who had fought an enemy that erased reality itself. She did not see the commander who had ordered space to collapse to protect a galaxy that barely respected him. And as silence once again filled the royal hall, the truth remained hidden but powerful. Some wars are not remembered because they are forgotten. They are forgotten because if people truly understood how close they came to nothing, they would never feel safe again. The Queen finally leaned back on her throne, her expression no longer amused, but calculating, because something in the human silence had begun to change the mood of the entire hall, and though he had not yet spoken of all his wars, the weight of them pressed against the golden walls like an invisible force. And now it was time for a truth that most of the galaxy had never considered, the truth behind 99 wars. The Queen's voice cut through the silence, sharper than before. 99 wars, she repeated. Tell me, human, how many of them did your kind start? It was a simple question, but it carried accusation, and many in the hall nodded slightly, because in their minds a species that fought so many wars must be violent, unstable, dangerous by nature. They expected him to defend humanity with pride or anger, but he did neither. None, he said calmly. A wave of murmurs moved across the chamber, some disbelieving, some mocking, but he continued before the noise could grow, his voice steady and clear. Humanity did not reach the stars to conquer, he said. We left Earth because we were curious, because we wanted to explore, to build, to survive beyond one fragile world. He turned slightly, his eyes moving across the gathered nobles and generals. Our first colonies were farms, research stations, mining outposts, not military fortresses. The old draft general watched closely now, because he knew the historical data supported those words. Early human expansion had been civilian-heavy, lightly armed, focused on trade and science. The First War began because we were seen as weak, the commander continued. A small species with short lives and no powerful alliances, easy territory. Several alien officials shifted uncomfortably, because their own archives contained records of early border conflicts where human settlements were attacked without formal declaration, often as tests of strength. When our colonies burned, we learned, he said simply. When our ships were destroyed, we adapted. He did not raise his voice. He did not accuse any specific empire. But the meaning was clear. Every war had shaped humanity, not into aggressors, but into survivors. War II was a pirate confederation that believed human trade routes were easy prey. He said, War V was a neighboring system that decided our terraforming equipment would serve them better than us. He paused briefly, letting the words settle. War XI began because a minor empire believed humanity would surrender after one orbital strike. A few of the older nobles lowered their eyes because they remembered those early miscalculations, the assumption that humans would break quickly under pressure. We did not, he said quietly. The hall felt smaller now, the golden banners less impressive, because with each sentence the image of humanity changed from reckless to resilient. By War XX, we understood a pattern, he continued. Every time we appeared peaceful, someone tested us. Every time we rebuilt, someone assumed we were still weak. His gaze returned to the Queen, not in challenge, but in calm honesty. So we stopped asking to be left alone, and we started preparing to ensure we could not be removed. There was no pride in his tone, only logic, and that logic was far more unsettling than anger would have been. 99 wars, he repeated softly. Not because we seek battle, but because we refuse extinction. The Queen's fingers tightened slightly on her throne again, because she realized something important. If even half of what he implied was true, then humanity was not a reckless species. It was a forged one, shaped again and again by external pressure. Each war taught us something, he went on. From the Karth Dominion, we learned rapid defense mobilization. From the Varel Swarm, we learned containment under impossible moral cost. From the frontier anomalies, we learned that threats do not always come with flags and speeches. He did not mention the Null by name, but the old general's mechanical eye flickered again at the subtle reference. We built stronger ships, he said, not to invade, but to ensure no one could burn our homes again without paying a price. He stepped slightly forward now, not aggressively, but firmly grounded. We trained soldiers not for glory, but for endurance. The hall was completely silent, because for the first time many present were not seeing a boastful warrior. They were seeing a civilization that had survived repeated attempts to erase it. Every war changed us, he admitted. We lost innocence, we lost naivety, and sometimes we lost parts of ourselves we can never recover. His eyes darkened slightly, reflecting memories that no metal could erase, but we did not lose our choice. The Queen narrowed her gaze. Choice, she echoed. Yes, he replied, the choice to stand again. A quiet understanding began to spread through the chamber. Humanity's strength did not come from natural aggression. It came from accumulated survival, from lessons written in blood and ash, from 99 separate moments where surrender would have been easier than resistance. We do not celebrate these wars, he said. We remember them. That final sentence carried more weight than any threat could have, because celebration implies hunger for more. Remembrance implies warning. The truth behind 99 wars was not domination. It was endurance, not conquest, but refusal to vanish. And as the Queen studied him in the center of her brilliant hall, she slowly began to understand the deeper meaning of his presence there. He was not standing before her as a conqueror or a beggar. He was standing as a representative of a species that had been tested 99 times and had not fallen, which meant if a 100th war truly was coming, the galaxy might soon learn the final lesson humanity had mastered: how to survive when survival itself seems impossible. The silence in the royal hall no longer felt like mockery. It felt heavy, uncertain, almost fragile, and in that silence the human commander finally spoke the words that changed everything. He did not raise his voice. He did not move dramatically. He simply looked at the Queen and said, "War number 100 has already begun." A ripple of shock passed through the chamber. Several nobles stood abruptly. Guards tightened their grip on their weapons, and the Queen's eyes sharpened like drawn blades. "Explain yourself," she ordered, her tone no longer playful, but commanding. He nodded once, calm as ever. 3 standard months ago, our deep-range sensors detected gravitational distortions beyond the outer veil, he began. At first we believed it was another anomaly, but the pattern was wrong. It was organized. He lifted his hand slightly, and a small projection device on his wrist activated, casting a simple holographic map into the air between him and the throne. It showed several distant systems marked in faint red. "These systems," he said, "have stopped responding." One of the alien admirals stepped forward, scanning the map with visible irritation. "Those regions are outside your territory," the admiral said. "They are not under human protection." The commander met his gaze without anger. "They are not under yours either," he replied. The word struck harder than intended, because it was true. The marked systems were independent trade zones and minor colonies belonging to no major empire, easy to ignore, easy to overlook. "What happened to them?" the Queen demanded. "We do not know fully yet," he answered. "But we know this: their stars are stable, their planets remain intact, yet all artificial signals are gone. No ships, no stations, no life signs detectable from orbit." A murmur of unease spread again. This was not simple invasion, not visible destruction. It was disappearance, and disappearance is far more frightening than open war. He zoomed the projection further. revealing faint lines connecting the missing systems in a slow curved path heading inward toward denser galactic regions. It is moving, he said quietly, not randomly, but deliberately. The old draft general stepped forward now, his mechanical eye glowing faintly. You believe this is the same threat from your frontier incident years ago, he said carefully. The human paused for a fraction of a second, then answered no. That single word caused deeper tension than confirmation would have. This is not the null, he continued. The energy readings are different, the distortion patterns are more stable, more controlled. Controlled by whom? The Queen pressed. That, he said, is what concerns us most. He deactivated the map, letting darkness return between them. Whatever this force is, it does not rush, it does not announce itself, it studies first. He let that sink in, then added, it has been observing populated regions for at least 2 cycles before each disappearance. A younger noble tried to laugh it off. Many species conduct reconnaissance, he said nervously. That does not mean galactic war. The commander's gaze shifted to him. Not cruel, not mocking, just direct. Reconnaissance usually ends with negotiation, demand, or attack, he said. This ends with silence. The Queen rose slowly from her throne now, the movement commanding immediate attention from every being in the hall. Why come here? She asked, her voice quieter, but far more serious than before. If this threat is real, why warn us? He held her gaze without hesitation. Because our projections show its path intersects with Zithran core systems within 2 standard years. For the first time since his arrival, true emotion crossed the Queen's face. Not fear exactly, but realization. Our fleets are strong, she said firmly, almost defensively. We command the largest armada in this sector. I know, he replied calmly. And it will not matter if you are not prepared for the right kind of enemy. Several admirals bristled at that statement, but none interrupted, because something in his tone suggested he was not insulting them. He was stating a calculation. We have already engaged its outer probes, he continued. Unmanned constructs testing response time and weapon capability, and the old general asked quietly, what were the results? The commander's expression hardened slightly. They allowed themselves to be destroyed. The hull froze again. They gathered data, he explained, then retreated beyond sensor range before we could track origin coordinates. Then we hunt them. One of the warlords growled. You cannot hunt what refuses to be seen, the commander answered. You can only prepare for when it chooses to be visible. He took a slow breath, and for the first time, there was a faint weight in his voice that hinted at urgency. War number 100 will not be like the others. He looked around the chamber, at the banners of proud empires, at the armored guards, at the shining symbols of authority. This enemy does not seek territory. It does not seek tribute. It seeks something else. And what is that? The Queen asked, almost unwilling to hear the answer. He met her eyes once more, steady and unflinching, dominance through erasure. A quiet tremor of understanding passed through the old general's present, because that phrase meant systematic removal of potential rivals before they could unite. It is eliminating independent systems first, he continued, testing reactions, measuring alliances, ensuring when it moves openly, resistance will be fragmented. The Queen slowly descended the steps of her throne, standing now on the same level as the human commander, no longer above him physically, though still surrounded by her court. You are certain, she said carefully. He nodded once, certain enough that humanity has already begun full mobilization. Several nobles reacted sharply at that. Mobilization, one whispered. Yes, he confirmed, shipyards operating beyond civilian capacity, border defenses expanded, deep-range scouts deployed continuously. And you come here not to beg, the Queen said slowly, beginning to understand. No, he replied, we do not beg. Then why, she pressed. He looked at her, and the hall felt smaller once more under the weight of his next words. Because we have fought 99 wars learning how not to die, he said quietly. But if this becomes the 100th, survival may require more than one species standing alone. For a long moment, no one spoke, pride battled with logic in the air, and every ruler present understood the unspoken truth. Ignoring this warning could mean extinction, but accepting it meant admitting the humans standing before them might be right. And somewhere beyond the shining walls of the celestial empire, in the silent darkness between stars, something ancient and patient continued moving inward, unseen but not unaware, closing the distance one system at a time. The queen stood very still after hearing his words, because something inside her instincts told her that the human commander was not speaking like a diplomat seeking alliance, and not like a warrior seeking challenge. He was speaking like someone who had already accepted the weight of future history, and now only wished the galaxy to survive what was coming. Outside the royal hall, the great capital city of Zithra shone under artificial sunlight. Floating transports moved slowly between golden towers, and millions of citizens lived their normal lives without knowing that somewhere beyond the outer stellar borders, a silent threat might already be learning how their civilization functioned. The queen turned slowly toward her court, then raised her hand, and for the first time in centuries of imperial history, she gave an order that shocked every noble present. "Begin defensive network integration with human command channels," she said, her voice carrying both authority and uncertainty. Murmurs exploded across the chamber. Some admirals objected immediately, arguing about sovereignty and honor. Others remained silent, understanding that survival sometimes demands uncomfortable decisions. But the queen ignored them and faced the human commander again. "If your projections are wrong," she said, "history will remember this as the moment Zithra surrendered its pride." The human shook his head slowly. History rarely remembers pride when extinction is the alternative. She studied him carefully, because something about his eyes had changed since the beginning of the audience. Not fear, not triumph, but quiet determination mixed with exhaustion carried from too many wars. "What do you want from us?" she asked finally, not as an emperor, but as a ruler facing uncertainty. "Preparation," he answered, "fleet coordination protocols, shared sensor networks, emergency evacuation routes for civilian populations, and the willingness to fight beside others if the enemy reveals itself." The queen remained silent for several seconds, weighing the pride of her empire against the possibility of invisible annihilation. Then she spoke again. "And humanity," she said. "What will humanity do?" The commander's expression softened slightly, just a little like a soldier thinking about home. "Humanity will stand where it always stands," he said, "between destruction and those who cannot defend themselves." A young royal officer nearby asked quietly, almost respectfully, "Do humans truly believe in protecting other species like that?" The commander answered without hesitation, "Not all humans, but enough." The hall became quiet again, because that answer carried something deeper than ideology. It carried cultural memory, centuries of survival, teaching humanity that cooperation sometimes means living longer than isolation. The queen walked closer to him now, until only 2 steps separated them, her crown reflecting the soft, golden lights of the chamber. "If this war comes," she said slowly, "and if humanity stands in the center of it, what makes you think you will survive 100 wars?" He did not answer immediately, because the question was not about numbers, it was about destiny. After a few breaths, he spoke. "Because we learned something from the first 99 wars," he said quietly. "Victory is not winning every battle. It is making sure there is someone left to continue living when the battle ends." Outside, far beyond the capital system, deep space monitoring stations suddenly detected a faint disturbance. Not aggressive, not fast, but deliberate. Something vast had entered long-range observation grids and was moving inward like a patient predator studying its environment. Inside the hall, a subtle alarm signal vibrated softly from the commander's wrist device. But he did not check it immediately, because he already knew what it meant. The hidden threat had taken another step closer. The queen noticed the small vibration, but said nothing, understanding that if the human reacted now, it would mean danger was already closer than any of them wanted to admit. Finally, the human commander spoke one last time before leaving the throne chamber, his voice low but clear, carrying the weight of 99 wars and the shadow of the 100th. If you hear nothing from humanity in the coming months, he said, assume we are fighting. He paused briefly, then added, and prepare to fight beside us. He turned slowly and began walking toward the Grand Hall doors where the two royal guards stepped aside without being ordered, because something in his presence commanded respect without words. Behind him, the Queen spoke one final sentence, not as an emperor, but as someone facing uncertainty in a darkening galaxy. Human commander, she said. He stopped, but did not turn around. If war number 100 comes, she said softly, and if humanity stands at the center of it, remember this. He waited. You are not alone in the darkness anymore, she finished. The human nodded once, very slowly, then continued walking, and as the grand doors closed behind him, the royal hall fell into heavy silence, because every ruler present understood that history was about to enter a new chapter, one where 99 wars had forged a civilization that refused to disappear, and one where the galaxy itself might soon be tested by an enemy that moved in silence, patience, and certainty, waiting for the moment when stars would begin to fade one by one, like lights, extinguished by an unseen hand.